technocrats and bureaucrats who would then draft regulations to try to perfect government and improve our lives. These would be people that would be professionals with these exotic degrees that didn't exist at the time that we now know as Masters of Public Administration, things like that. Professional government people. And so what they believe is that only these administrators would be honest enough and well-trained enough to do the right thing. Because the politicians really couldn't be trusted because they were kind of close to the people. And of course, we the people, well, you know, we're kind of slow. We don't like giving up our autonomy to government, do we? So where do we see in California perhaps the most egregious and obvious example of the administrative state trying to run our lives with regulations? Where might we see that? The Air Resources Board? All right, well, the tax board, the franchise tax board that's a good example. I think let's take the California Air Resources Board. All right? The California Air Resources Board has been charged by your legislature with the passage of AB 32, California's own misguided version of cap and trade energy tax, and more about that in a few moments. So when we passed AB 32 in 2006, and unfortunately the governor signed it, this measure said that California had to reduce its global greenhouse gas emissions by 30% now in only 10 years, by 2020. Now that's a tall measure. If you got rid of all electrical production in the state, you wouldn't make the 30% number. If you got rid of all privately owned automobiles in the state, you wouldn't make the number. So, the Air Resources Board has some interesting rules that they're preparing to draft. One of them would require that automobiles sold in California would have a metallic coating on the window to reflect sunlight so that the use of air conditioning would be less in the summer. Now, the only problem with that is that these little devices don't work if you have metallicized windows because the radio frequencies can't get out of the car. So you'll need some sort of a retrofit. Of course, that's one way to enforce the no hands rule and the no texting rule. You wouldn't be able to use them in the car anyway. So that's what the Air Resources Board is doing with the rules. Now think about what they're doing with these rules. When they draft a rule that says you have to have a metallicized window in your car, what is that mimicking when they do that? Well, I think that that's mimicking my function as a California State Assemblyman when I draft a bill. It is, isn't it? It's the legislative function. And then when they approve their own regulation, which they can do, what is that like? Well, that's like the governor signing a bill into law, isn't it? And then when they enforce the regulation that they drafted and approved themselves, now they're doing, of course, the executive branch police authority that is properly the executive branch. And let's say you don't like how they're enforcing that regulation on you. What happens when you complain? Well, they are the first level of government that would adjudicate your complaint, aren't they? And what branch of government is that power? It's the judicial branch. And so you find in one unelected bureaucracy the power that the Founding Fathers would have clearly seen as supposed to be resident in all three branches of government: legislative, executive, and judicial. Do you see the problem? Do you understand what the administrative state means to us and our liberties? Now let's look at an example from the federal government, the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. The EPA, within the last month or two, just drafted a rule that said that is a toxic gas. Now, I know that among the Tea Party rally set, that given that I'm an elected official, most of you will think that that is in fact a toxic gas in my case. But think about it. They just said with one stroke of the pen, or click of the computer keyboard, that a common gas that is emitted by everyone in this room, I hope, then a common gas that the trees outside need to grow is toxic and therefore is deserving of regulation to the point where they can tell you what to drive, where to live, what kind of car, what kind of house, what kind of factory you're going to be working in. Everything can be regulated because of that rule. Now, isn't it interesting the timing of the EPA making this rule? Because all last year, our junior senator from California, Barbara Boxer, and I don't like saying her name, our junior senator from California, the chair of the Senate Committee on the Environment, was working on a cap-and-trade energy tax that would hit the average American family to about $2,000 per year per family. And so as she's working on this bill, which is radical even for a lot of her Democrat colleagues, she's beginning to fail. And her staff is like leaving her committee in record rate. They're just like rotating off her committee because they can't stand to work for her. And she's failing on the bill. And so what do the Democrats do? What does Harry Reid do? He gives her bill to John Kerry, who's then starting to work on it with Senator, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. And so it's going to do the same thing. But Barbara Boxer, even Kerry and Graham started to fail on the bill. They couldn't get the bill passed and out of the Senate. And it was then that the EPA wrote the rule. So think about it. Wait a minute. What's wrong with this picture? The House passed a cap-and-trade energy bill, the Henry Waxman bill, Waxman-Markey. Sent it over to the Senate. The Senate didn't work on it. They had their own version under Boxer and then under Kerry and Graham. They couldn't get it passed. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't this how our government is supposed to work, where the House and the Senate pass the same exact version of a bill and send it to the President for his signature or veto, whereupon it becomes law or not? Isn't that the way it's supposed to work? And so how is it then that the Environmental Protection Agency gets to do with a rule what Barbara Boxer tried all 2009 to do and failed to do? Do you understand the danger? Are you seeing what I see? This is alarming to me. And this is why I am running for the United States Senate against Barbara Boxer. We have to stop this. We have to reassert our rights as American citizens. We have to ensure that our elected men and women at all levels of government understand that the first order of business of any newly elected official is to do what? To raise their right hand and swear an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. Right? Other issues that probably have driven a few people to this meeting tonight. The stimulus program last year. $800 billion. Now, unless you've been a drug dealer in a previous life or in law enforcement where you've been catching them, you probably haven't seen $1 million in one place. I have not. I had a speech the other night, though, where a guy raised his hand and he said he had seen $1 million that was in Las Vegas with a glass. You know, he said it was only about as big as a bread basket. It was $10,100 bills. I was thinking, boy, could I use that on my campaign? So, it was about as big as a bread box. So a billion is 1,000 millions, and a trillion is 1,000 billions. Now, it's still hard to conceive of, because now we're all like, wow, that's a lot. A trillion is a lot. 800 billion is almost a trillion. Let me break it down to you what it means to everyone in this room. To repay the principal and interest on that $800 billion loan, much of it from the People's Republic of China, every American will have to pay $280 a month for the rest of their lives to pay it back.